I felt like I had to address this one. I am Asian American. But as I continue to delve into the spiritual and formless, I am challenged with disidentifying with my cultural group that I've been born into. Could you offer insight and help with this spiritual process? This is challenging to overcome. Really, all conditioning is challenging to overcome. And it seems like our culture, I know for myself, I'm Asian Canadian or Chinese Canadian, born in Canada, second generation. My father was born in Canada, but his family left during the Depression to go back to China because they thought it was hard here. And so it was difficult to grow up in two different cultures. In a way, my family was traditional, but not really traditional Chinese. And, oh, you might get a laugh out of this. Those who are Asian and born in North America, or the Western culture, just could be Europe as well, were known as bananas. Yellow on the outside and white on the inside. So I grew up speaking Chinese, but because there was very few Chinese at that time when I was growing up, I was teased a lot. So I had decided from a very young age to drop the language. And what's interesting is how much I wanted to run away from my own culture. I didn't want to be Chinese. I couldn't. I wanted to be accepted and fit in to the Western world. But then, as I delved into the spiritual dimension, I realized I don't even want to be Western at all anyways, or Chinese. It's like, who am I? I'm not this. I'm not the Western culture. I'm not even the Asian culture. But yet there's beautiful, beautiful, what can you say, patterns of behavior, or the culture can be quite beautiful. The Asian culture actually can be quite beautiful. The spiritual Asian culture is very beautiful. So I found that it's not about letting go of either culture, but recognizing that I am not any of it, but yet can still live and move and do some of the actions that the culture might have taken on over many generations. And when we are on this spiritual path, I mean, do we literally need to eventually give up everything? And it's not giving up in the sense of rejection. It's giving up in the sense of acceptance of all things, but attachment to none. So not identifying with any of it, but you can still do some of the Asian cultural things, or the Western cultural things, or wherever you're from. And it could be quite beautiful. It's not our actions that show us the dimension of stillness, but it's what's inside, internally, what we know and what we feel and what we sense and what we can include with no judgment of any culture. And yes, we may say some of them, but wait a second here. What about some of that cultural stuff? And we've all gone, and every culture has gone through it, including the Western culture. And that could be, say, for example, women. The difficulties and that women have had in having to then come out and not be suppressed. So every culture has its suppression. And coming into our spiritual essence and living as a spiritual being, a human being, is that we transcend all things that will suppress us and condition us. Everything. It doesn't mean, if you choose, for example, a woman who wants to stay home and raise their children. It's not a problem. Before, it was like, this is what they did. And now it's a choice. And even when it's a choice, we transcend any identification of being anything. So we have certain roles that we play. There's mother, there's father, so there's the parent role. There's your work, whatever your work is, that role. But those are just roles and functions, which is needed as a temporary form. Because eventually our children grow up and we can't, deal with them the same way when they were little. So we have to give up that role. Some parents don't. And some children don't give up their role. They continue being children, right? And going home and wanting something from mom and dad or something. So it's finding the beauty in the arising differences, in the cultural differences. With love, not with judgment, but with love and acceptance. And knowing that perhaps there are going to be some cultures where, it's kind of like behind in the times. And recognizing that we were once there. And this is the evolution of human consciousness that I see that's happening, is that each part of the world is evolving. Is it slow? Is it fast? Don't know. Really, the mind likes it to be quicker or slower, depending on whether you are in that mode of resistance or anticipation. You can't wait. Can we just be here and hold the space and be in the stillness, and from stillness act? Have the right action come through us. in that state of stillness and equanimity to all things. Oh, I can't remember her name, but I watched her on YouTube. Oh, I wish I could remember her name. But she was quite an interesting woman. She was on Oprah, and she's quite funny too, or at least she can work with people. And she believes that everybody is prejudiced. Everybody has some prejudice in them. Because when we look at all these different faces and all these different colors, her belief is that those people who say, oh, they don't see your color, that they're lying. Of course you see the color. So, but can we look past that color? So, and that's the spiritual development within us, is that can we look beyond the form? Because every single form has some sort of marking on them, distinction. And every single form has gone through something in their lifetime. And most likely, it's been suffering. Can we look beyond that and see their essence, which is the same essence as what is inside you? So looking at them, knowing that yes, they're white, they're black, they're yellow, they're brown, they've got polka dots. It's actually a challenge. That in itself is a challenge. Because oftentimes, and I've experienced this myself, because I grew up here, right? I grew up in Canada, and people used to tell me that all you Chinese, you all look the same. And I'm like, really? Like, I don't think so. I look at other Chinese people and they look different to me. I mean, they don't look the same. You all look the same. And then when I went to China for the first time, I was shocked at myself. But here I was on the street, and I see hundreds of black heads. And I said, oh my God, everybody looks the same. And, that's because that's the general thing. That's what they look at in the general thing when they combine a group of people. And they cannot see the distinct features in them. We don't really look the same. It's like saying all white people look the same. Maybe, who knows, maybe when the Asians come over here and they see a bunch of white hair, but they got different color hair, but still, bunch of white skin, and they say, oh, they all look the same. They're all white. They're all pale. I mean, So, can we look beyond that? And I don't know, it is sometimes challenging for me. There is something that goes on inside my own head that when I see somebody of a different race or something, that's different, there's something that goes on. I admit that. There's something go on. And it takes work to look beyond that. And it takes practice to look beyond that. So it's an interesting challenge, and I invite you to that challenge and practice to see beyond the form, beyond what you see externally, and watch your mind, watch your thoughts, see what comes up, and go, wow, you'll be amazed on what goes on in your head, and how often and how little we can actually look beyond the form. It takes work and practice.